machine around here anywhere?
Stop worrying. Everything's going to be all right.
For decades, Bing Crosby was America's golden voice, charming millions with his warm baritone and effortless grace. But behind the smooth vocals and holiday cheer was a reality few ever saw. Now, nearly half a century after his death, a revelation from within his own family casts a long shadow over his polished legacy. His children have finally broken their silence, and what they've confirmed changes everything. What secrets did the world's most beloved crooner take to his grave? And why did his own sons live such haunted lives? Stay with us, because the truth that took 48 years to surface may be Crosby's most unforgettable performance yet. Bing Crosby's entry into music. Bing Crosby was the fourth of 7 children in a working-class Catholic family. When he was just 3 years old, his family relocated to Spokane, where he would spend most of his formative years. His father, Harry Lincoln Crosby, worked as a bookkeeper, while his mother, Catherine Harrigan, instilled in the children a deep love of music rooted in their Irish-American heritage. Bing attended Gonzaga High School and later Gonzaga University, where he initially pursued a law degree. Raised under the structure of Jesuit education, he developed a strong appreciation for language, debate, and public speaking, though his true passion lay elsewhere: music. From a young age, Crosby was captivated by the emerging American entertainment scene. In Spokane, he had access to vaudeville acts at the local auditorium theater, where he worked during the summers. These performances left a lasting impression, especially the charismatic stage presence of artists like Al Jolson, whose powerful vocal delivery and emotional storytelling became a major influence on Crosby's own singing style. At home, he had the rare advantage of listening to records thanks to his father's early phonograph, a luxury at the time. These recordings introduced him to jazz, a genre still in its infancy, and sparked a lifelong passion for the rhythms and improvisational flair that would come to define much of his own musical output. Elsewhere, in the early 1920s, while still in Spokane, Crosby became acquainted with Al Rinker, who shared a taste for music and played the piano. Together, they operated as a duo at clubs and college dances around the Pacific Northwest. Their smooth harmonies and witty stage banter won them a following. Thus encouraged, the duo set off for Los Angeles in search of a larger opportunity. There, their acts attracted the eyes of some entertainment insiders who were instrumental in their being booked into larger venues. The jazz-flavored vocals, coupled with their comic antics, set them apart from all other acts of the time and opened the doors to Crosby's entry into professional entertainment. The turning point in Bing's early career occurred in 1926, when he and Rinker landed jobs with the famous bandleader Paul Whiteman. The invaluable exposure gave Crosby a foothold on the national market while placing him with some of the best musicians of the day. Piano player Harry Barris would soon join the duo for the trio known as the Rhythm Boys. The growth of their fame saw singers unmatched in popularity. Their popularity soared, and Crosby became the unmistakable star with his smooth baritone voice and laid-back style. This association with the Whiteman Orchestra was the official beginning of Bing Crosby's professional life, earning him a spot on the road to making his mark as one of the giant entertainers of the 20th century. What began on small-town stages was only the quiet prelude to a revolution that would change how the world heard music forever. Career innovations. Bing Crosby's solo career in the 1930s and 1940s marked a transformative period in American music. After departing from the Rhythm Boys, Crosby's distinct vocal style quickly propelled him to superstardom. His relaxed, smooth baritone delivery struck a chord with audiences during a time of economic hardship and world conflict. Signature songs like White Christmas, released in 1942, became instant classics. White Christmas remains one of the best-selling singles of all time. Another milestone hit, Swinging on a Star, released in 1944, showcased his versatility and earned him an Academy Award for Best Original Song. These songs weren't just commercial successes. They became deeply ingrained in American culture, defining the sound of mid-century popular music. Crosby's influence wasn't confined to the recording studio or concert hall. He also played a pivotal role in shaping the technology that supported the music industry. In the late 1940s, Bing invested in Ampex, a small electronics company that had begun developing magnetic tape recording in the United States. The technology, originally derived from captured German designs after World War II, allowed for higher fidelity and editing capabilities in audio production. Crosby not only funded Ampex, but also helped them refine their equipment, paving the way for the first commercial reel-to-reel tape recorders. This innovation revolutionized the quality and efficiency of music production and would go on to impact everything from studio albums to broadcast media. A notable advance of Crosby in broadcasting was achieved by embracing the use of pre-recorded radio shows very early in the industry. At that time, live broadcasting was the accepted norm. The broadcasts were hardly polished and allowed almost no flexibility for performers. Eager to lighten the load imposed upon himself by the grueling demands of live radio schedules, in 1946, Crosby began using magnetic tape to pre-record his NBC radio series, The Philco Radio Time. The event was not immediately met with approval by the networks, but it became clear very quickly that this advance was going to change everything. The advancement toward better audio quality, post-production editing, and syndication was on. Others followed Crosby's lead, causing an avalanche of changes in the recording and broadcasting universe for radio and, ultimately, for television. Without transforming technology, Crosby's crooner style became a gold standard for male vocalists in the 20th century. Close miking the microphone as opposed to projecting to the two back rows of a theater, he innovated an intimate, conversational style of singing. This redefined vocal performance and was modeled by Frank Sinatra, Perry Como, Dean Martin, and, later on, Elvis Presley. Bing Crosby did not just dominate the charts. He revolutionized the recording, broadcasting, and performing of music. His innovations, contributing to a lasting cultural landscape and defining the contemporary entertainment scene, have had major repercussions. Bing Crosby on fatherhood. In a rare moment of vulnerability during a 1959 interview, Bing Crosby opened up about his personal regrets, particularly surrounding his role as a father. Despite being celebrated globally for his musical and cinematic achievements, Crosby revealed that his greatest personal shortcoming had nothing to do with fame or fortune. It was his failure as a parent. He openly admitted that he had not been the kind of father his sons needed, especially during their formative years. At a time when celebrity parents were rarely questioned or self-reflective in the public eye, Crosby's honesty offered a striking contrast to his polished public image. Crosby acknowledged that his approach to parenting was overly focused on discipline and achievement. He admitted to instilling a strict household environment where order and control often took precedence over affection and emotional expression. Crosby believed that imposing firm rules and demanding excellence would help his children build character and resilience. However, he later recognized that this mindset created emotional distance and inadvertently suppressed the warmth and support that children require. His sons were left to interpret their father's rigidity not as love, but as coldness, something Crosby eventually regretted deeply. Crosby, in the same interview, referred to his upbringing as a major consideration that influenced his own style of parenting. Raised in a traditional Catholic household in Spokane, Washington, Crosby was brought up with an emphasis on moral values, religious discipline, and high expectations for personal behavior. He had absorbed those lessons early on and applied them, almost unquestioningly, to the upbringing of his children. From then on, however, Crosby began to see that what may have worked for him in his formative years simply did not cut any ice in raising his sons in a different generation and under the pressures of public scrutiny. Forevermore, he came to regret this rigidity or inability to move with change. Most importantly, Crosby felt remorse for not having spent sufficient time with his children. High on the list of things he regretted was the intrusion of fame into the tender moments spent with his little ones. Every set behind the spotlight, every radio show, movie, recording session, or concert seemed to draw him farther from home. When he was at home, his main concern was making sure that there were rules. This distance of emotional presence was more obvious to him once his sons got older, some of whom faced challenges with mental health and addiction. This late-in-life reflection was more than just a confession. It was a recognition that even icons are only human. It added to the complexity of the public's perspective on Bing Crosby, not only an artist in his own right, but also a father, haunted by unspeakable regret. Gary Crosby's memoir. In 1983, Gary Crosby, the eldest son of Bing Crosby and his first wife, Dixie Lee, published a revealing memoir titled Going My Own Way. In it, Gary provided an unfiltered account of his childhood, making headlines by describing his father not as the warm, affable figure known to the public, but as a stern, emotionally distant, and often abusive parent. The book marked one of the earliest times a celebrity child publicly criticized a legendary parent, and it caused a national stir. Gary's candid writing shattered long-standing assumptions about the Crosby family's seemingly perfect image and brought widespread attention to the often hidden realities of life inside celebrity households. One of the most disturbing elements of Gary's memoir was his detailed description of physical abuse, which he alleged took place regularly during his upbringing. He wrote of being beaten with belts for perceived misbehavior, sometimes with little warning or explanation. The punishments, he said, were harsh and humiliating, administered in a household where fear and silence were the norm. Gary also discussed verbal degradation, claiming that his father often used cutting remarks to assert control or express disappointment. These moments were not rare, according to Gary. They defined much of his early life. The physical and emotional impact of this treatment, he believed, contributed to his struggles with self-worth and substance abuse later in life. He seems to have been brought up in a rather brutal environment. He hated his father during childhood because of the fear he instilled in Gary growing up. "He is to me an old man just like anyone else," Gary would say of Bing, who, to Gary, never offered any tenderness or praise and demanded respect from all. He would even dwell on the public events attended when the family posed for photographs, citing that such warm moments could not be a descriptor of their family life. He is said to view himself as being distant emotionally, even when they are appearing together on television or radio. Gary paints a very complicated and troubling image of the legendary performer, not just in his household terms alone, but also in the huge public contrast between the public Bing Crosby and the private one. This public sensation brought with the release of Going My Own Way turned the tide in public debate at that time, leading into what we now see as extensive media coverage and setting fans and critics apart, making some see Gary's claims as such an overslay or opportunism, and others as courageous acts of truth-telling. The book turned the reputation of Bing Crosby from his wholesome American icon into its historic antithesis and left the way open for subsequent biographical investigations into the family dynamic of Crosby's household. Whether everyone believes everything that is said within it, Gary Crosby's memoir demanded a rereading of the celebrity mythology and inserted itself into increasing attention toward the tragedy of emotional and physical abuse in even the most idolized families. Lindsay Crosby's tragic end. Lindsay Crosby, the youngest of Bing Crosby and Dixie Lee's 4 sons, was born on January 5, 1938, into a life of privilege and public fascination. As a member of one of America's most famous entertainment families, expectations were placed on Lindsay from the moment he was born. He grew up in the shadow of his father's towering fame, often seen at public appearances alongside his brothers and parents. Despite the image of a glamorous Hollywood upbringing, Lindsay's life was marked by personal struggles that began early and intensified over time. While his brothers Gary, Dennis, and Philip pursued careers in the entertainment industry, Lindsay also attempted to follow that path, hoping to make his own mark in show business. Like his siblings, Lindsay made attempts to build a career as a performer, joining his brothers in musical acts and appearing on television. However, despite his talents and good looks, he struggled to escape the pressure of his last name. Comparisons to his father were inevitable, and Lindsay found it difficult to live up to the high expectations associated with the Crosby legacy. The pressure to succeed, combined with a reportedly strict and emotionally distant upbringing, took a toll on his confidence. He battled with alcoholism and depression, challenges that would persist throughout his adult life. Though he worked in the entertainment industry, his career never reached a point of stability or widespread recognition, which only added to his personal frustrations. His life became more entangled with marital straitjackets and financial knots as he grew older. Married 3 times, he had a number of children, yet his relationships are often so turbulent. Legal battles, debt, and the struggle to maintain his profession were all burdens in that mess. By the 1980s, Lindsay had sunk much deeper into the mire and faced mounting emotional and financial pressure. Once the name had opened doors to high society and opportunity, it had now become something to bear. Reports from people close to him suggest that he bore a quotient of failure and alienation, alongside the death of friends and an increasingly estranging distance from the prominent family role he once enjoyed. On December 11, 1989, Lindsay Crosby took his own life at the age of 51. He was also the first of Bing Crosby's sons to take his own life, and the news stunned both the entertainment world and the public. His death also resurrected the issues of emotional complexities in celebrity family growing and highlighted the psychological toll on disappointed expectations and unresolved personal pain. Although Lindsay's life did not take the well-trodden path of fame it had once appeared destined to follow, his story is a bittersweet reminder of the human cost behind public success and family legacy. Just as the shock of Lindsay's fate began to settle, another heartbreaking chapter in the Crosby family was quietly unfolding. Dennis Crosby's career. Dennis Crosby was one of the twin sons of Bing Crosby and Dixie Lee, and the brother of Gary, Philip, and Lindsay Crosby. Like the rest of his siblings, Dennis was exposed to the entertainment industry from a young age, frequently appearing in public with his famous father and family. In the 1950s and 1960s, he pursued a career in show business, with roles in films such as The Night the World Exploded, 1957, and appearances on television programs, including the Jack Benny program. He also performed musically with his brothers as part of the Crosby Boys, a quartet that aimed to carry on the family's entertainment legacy. Though Dennis had a pleasant singing voice and a polished screen presence, his career struggled to gain traction beyond the novelty of the family name. As Dennis moved into adulthood, the weight of expectation grew heavier. Being the son of one of the most iconic figures in American entertainment came with enormous pressure, and Dennis frequently found himself compared to his father. While Bing Crosby enjoyed decades of adulation and critical acclaim, Dennis struggled to establish an independent identity in an industry where the Crosby surname was both a blessing and a curse. These pressures contributed to emotional instability that grew more severe in later years. Like several of his brothers, Dennis battled alcohol abuse, a problem that intensified as his personal and professional challenges mounted. His inner turmoil was rarely visible to the public, but behind the scenes, his mental health deteriorated. Apart from emotional traumas, Dennis had to negotiate personal hurdles that made his difficulties even more complicated. He married Pat Sheehan, a former showgirl and actress who had previously dated Bing Crosby, adding a layer of complexity to the family dynamic. The marriage was dissolved, and custody battles and financial hardship were problems that left Dennis staggering. Just as somehow lightening his rainy days, there was a much-publicized paternity suit back in the late 1970s that turned out to be emotionally and financially draining. With this, along with family legacies, expectations, and unresolved childhood issues, Dennis went into a long period of despair. His attempts to tiptoe around the limelight did little for the pressure that came with being forever tied to an icon. Dennis Crosby took his own life on May 4, 1991, at the age of 56, 2 years after his brother Lindsay had taken his own life. His death in tragic circumstances only further cast the shadow surrounding the Crosby family. Dennis's death was yet another grim reminder of how fame and legacy disrupt the natural psyche of those who come into it. Not as much is known about him publicly as in the case of his father, but Dennis Crosby's life and death prove rather eminently the burdens synonymous with a celebrated name. Philip Crosby's military. Philip Crosby, one of the twin sons born to Bing Crosby, and Dixie Lee on July 13, 1934, led a life that balanced military service and modest involvement in show business. While he was surrounded by fame from birth and shared the stage with his siblings in The Crosby Boys, Philip carved out a distinct identity through his service in the U.S. Marine Corps, where he earned respect outside the limelight. After his military stint, he took on a few minor acting roles, including appearances in films such as Holiday in Europe, 1959, and occasional television cameos. Although his roles never achieved major recognition, they kept him connected to the entertainment world in a quieter capacity than his more publicly active brothers. Unlike his older brother, Gary, Philip Crosby never made public accusations against their father. He remained largely silent about the internal dynamics of the Crosby household, choosing not to speak publicly about his upbringing. While others in the family, including Gary and Lindsay, spoke openly about the challenges they faced under Bing's strict parenting, Philip refrained from adding to the public discourse. This decision helped him maintain a relatively low profile, allowing him to avoid much of the media scrutiny that surrounded his more outspoken siblings. His privacy left the public with few details about his personal views, but it also set him apart as someone seeking to manage his life outside of sensational headlines. Philip was, nevertheless, confronted with character flaws. In some respects, alcoholism, an all-too-familiar disease of the Crosby family, used to affect Philip much more publicly. His family life was beset with several marriages and divorces. There were reports of numerous marriages and divorces with showgirls and entertainers. Somehow caught up in legal problems, including arrests for drunk driving, he further forged a negative reputation for himself. And thankfully, these incidents did not receive the kind of publicity that his brother's issues did. His addiction problems and stormy relationships often painted the picture of a man battling with his demons, but in a lot more private sense, away from the public that his family used to dominate. Philip Crosby died on January 13, 2004, from natural causes at age 69. Philip's death closed that public era of Bing Crosby's sons, since he was the last of the four brothers to die. His quiet life and passing are a steady, dignified contrast to the tragic endings of his brothers Lindsay and Dennis, thus entrenching his worldview in some ways. Philip led a fairly private life, operating on the edges of fame, confronting the matter of how he moved within the Crosby clan without any public confrontation. Although overshadowed by his father and brothers, Philip's existence turned the page on one of Hollywood's most thickly scrutinized and complex families. The professional-personal divide. Bing Crosby spent much of his career cultivating a public persona that was universally admired. Known for his mellow baritone voice, easygoing charm, and wholesome screen presence, Crosby became an emblem of mid-20th century American entertainment. To audiences, he was the friendly crooner who brought comfort through songs like White Christmas and starred in feel-good films alongside Bob Hope and other major stars of the era. His demeanor projected calm, reliability, and approachability, and he was often cast as the ideal American father figure or lovable everyman. This image was meticulously maintained throughout his career, helping him become one of the most beloved and enduring entertainers in the world. However, beneath the polished surface, Bing Crosby was known to be a man of emotional reserve, even among those closest to him. Colleagues, friends, and biographers have often remarked on his guarded personality, describing him as distant, quiet, and sometimes aloof when not performing. Unlike many of his show business peers, Crosby rarely socialized with the Hollywood elite in an open or flamboyant manner. He was professional and courteous, but not known for being particularly warm or expressive in private settings. His performances may have exuded warmth, but in personal interactions, Crosby kept much of his true self carefully tucked away. It was this guarded nature that he employed to sustain a conscious partitioning of his outward public persona from the recesses of his private self. Crosby had little tolerance for the thought of public scrutiny concerning his personal life, working assiduously to protect his family and feelings from the rays of public glare. Whereas other stars of his time thrived on publicity as a necessary evil of fame, Crosby often ducked interviews that would focus on his personal life. He offered little in terms of press access to his domestic life, and his media appearance was tightly controlled to ensure the clean-cut image of himself that had brought him commercial success. Thus, this separation rendered it more difficult to comprehend his true self beyond the lights of stage and screen, even for strangers, and sometimes even friends. This made many of Crosby's close associates find him hard to truly know even off-stage. While he worked professionally with producers, co-stars, and business partners, few ever felt that they really knew the man behind the voice. Some co-workers recounted small deeds of kindness. Others recalled a more brooding side of Crosby. His professional ability to compartmentalize public from private supported his extended career, and their identities remained shrouded in mystery. To the ones who moved in his orbit, Crosby was a paradox very familiar and strangely unknowable, a fascination still held by both historians and fans. Crosby's efforts toward reconnection. Following the death of his first wife, Dixie Lee, in 1952, Bing Crosby underwent a noticeable personal transformation. Her passing, which followed a long struggle with alcoholism, deeply affected him and marked a turning point in his emotional life. In the years after Dixie's death, Crosby became increasingly introspective, reflecting more often on his family and the impact of his demanding career. While he had spent much of his earlier life focused on professional success, the loss appeared to trigger a re-evaluation of his priorities. Those close to him noted a subtle shift in his demeanor. He became more contemplative, more aware of the cost his fame had exacted on those around him, especially his children. In his later years, Crosby made genuine efforts to reconnect with his sons from his first marriage. He was aware of the emotional distance that had characterized much of their upbringing and attempted to bridge that gap before it was too late. Although his earlier parenting style had been marked by strict discipline and formality, Bing began to soften, spending more time with his children when his schedule allowed. He invited them to join him on vacations and at his golf tournaments, and sought to offer more personal support. While these efforts came late, they were meaningful to some of his children, particularly Lindsay, who acknowledged his father's attempts at reconciliation. In fact, Bing started a realistic rear end of his life when he married actress Katharine Grant in 1957. 3 children came into being, and according to one report, Bing exhibited a more relaxed and loving attitude towards parenting with this second brood. Mere patience, as others have noticed, as compared to his erstwhile marriage. The great man attended school affairs and spent time at home. He was often not the kind of father he pretended to be. That growth as a parent emerged from the broader changes that he had begun to find, perhaps, as much through maturity or reflection as through the lessons of his earlier transgressions. On October 14, 1977, Bing Crosby died suddenly at age 74 while playing a game of golf close to Madrid, Spain. He had played 18 holes and was apparently in excellent spirits when he collapsed with massive heart failure. He did not wake up. This event occurred no sooner than one expected, causing shock waves across the globe. It marked the ending of an epoch, but the beginning of a much more complex legacy created out of the winning artist, and that of a man who tried to bring his own peace in the autumn of his life with past deeds and mend the rift that fame and time had created. As the final chapter of Crosby's life quietly closed, a very different story about his legacy was just beginning to unfold. Reframing the Crosby legacy. The legacy of Bing Crosby, once seen almost exclusively through the lens of his monumental achievements in music, radio, and film, began to shift significantly in the 1980s and 1990s. This change was largely sparked by the release of Gary Crosby's 1983 memoir, Going My Own Way, which offered a stark contrast to the public image of the beloved entertainer. Gary's allegations of emotional and physical abuse, combined with his personal struggles, cast a new light on the Crosby household. This narrative deepened as 2 of Bing's other sons, Lindsay and Dennis, took their own lives in 1989 and 1991, respectively. These tragedies raised public questions about the cost of growing up under the shadow of a celebrity father, and led many to reconsider the balance between Crosby's professional triumphs and personal shortcomings. Although no formal statement was issued by the surviving Crosby children in response to the memoir or their brothers' deaths, individual interviews and remarks over the years have lent support to aspects of Gary's account. Some family members, like Lindsay, expressed understanding of the points raised, while others, including Philip, remained more reserved or dismissive. Biographers and reporters covering the family noted the varying perspectives among Crosby's children, reflecting the complexities within their relationships and experiences. Since the decades after those revelations, biographers and cultural historians have come forward to share a fuller and more nuanced view of Bing Crosby. While certainly undisputed are his incomparable contributions to American entertainment, most notably in terms of innovations in recording technology, early radio and television dominance, and iconic status as a crooner, so too are his neglected roles of father and husband that loomed increasingly large in the understanding of the man behind the mic. Today, then, Bing Crosby's legacy is, in fact, that monumentally convolved, remembered either through that reconciliation or because of it, as one of the greatest names in the history of 20th century entertainment, whose hands built the soft sound and sleek structure of much modern media. He has inspired a contrary slew of legends as a source of the infractions made by fame, the internal strain that can somehow frequently be present in celebrity families. where discipline, image, and ambition sometimes obfuscate emotional involvement and attachment. Outro. If you found this story as revealing as we did, don't forget to like the video, leave a comment with your thoughts, and subscribe for more untold truths behind Hollywood legends. And before you go, be sure to watch the next video on your screen. There's so much more waiting to be uncovered.